It doesn't matter the number of times people read all of the definitions that health insurance companies will send them to help you understand what is a deductible, what is in-network, what is out-of-network, what are copays, what is co-insurance. And I never get it to click for anybody until I can give them a specific example. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today, is take you through different examples to show you how these health insurance terms apply. This is Mr. Mouse. Mr. Mouse just wants to go for a simple doctor visit where he has to pay $35. Yes, the doctor is in network, meaning his health insurance has a contract with the doctor to say, this is exactly how much we're going to pay you for every single medical service you offer. For a simple doctor's visit, Mr. Mouse pays $35. When you have a standard flat fee like that, where you pay the same amount every time you go to see, for example, a doctor, it's called a copay. And so if Mr. Mouse goes several times to see his doctor and those $35 bills start to add up to more and more and more, Mr. Mouse is looking to hit his $700 deductible. What a lucky mouse. It's hard to get a $700 deductible in America. And so once Mr. Mouse has gone to 20 visits for this $35 doctor visit, he has hit that $700 deductible, which means that if he goes to see his doctor any more times than 20 times, his health insurance will cover the entire bill. Let's make things a little more complicated. What if Mr. Mouse goes to a couple of doctors? Mr. Mouse has his normal main doctor here. And then Mr. Mouse goes to see a specialist where he ends up having to pay 20% of the full bill. So when you have to pay a percentage of any kind of medical bill, it's called coinsurance. Sometimes people will pay a copay for regular doctors and specialists. Sometimes you'll pay a coinsurance for either or both. Your health insurance plan, however it's set up, is unique to your plan. Everyone is very different. I'm just trying to give you some examples. So Mr. Mouse goes to see a specialist where his health plan says he pays 20% of the full bill. We don't know how much that full bill is, so we don't know how many visits Mr. Mouse can do until he hits that $700 deductible. But once again, once Mr. Mouse hits that $700 deductible, his health insurance will pay the rest of, if he goes to any more visits to the specialist, the health insurance will cover everything above $700. What a generous health insurance. When you go to multiple doctors like this and your deductible reapplies, that's something called a split deductible. And you'll know you have one if you have something called an out-of-pocket max. For some people, their deductible is the same thing as their out-of-pocket max. But for Mr. Mouse, you'll see that he has an out-of-pocket max of $7,000 for himself as an individual. So Mr. Mouse could go to several doctors and have to pay up to that $700 deductible each time. So that it could be that in a given year, the maximum amount that Mr. Mouse is going to pay is $7,000. Now, if Mr. Mouse also has a spouse and a couple of kids, there's usually a separate out-of-pocket max for the family. So if you have multiple people on your health insurance, you might end up spending $14,000. Well, Mr. Mouse might for a given year if everybody ends up having some major accidents. High deductible health plans are flipped around. They're completely different. So if Mr. Mouse had a high deductible health plan, he would actually pay everything, the full medical bill, when he went to go see his doctors until he had paid $700 total. And then after that, his health insurance, again, this is very specific to your health insurance plan, so it could be different for you. But Mr. Mouse's health insurance says that after he's paid $700 total, after that he'll pay 20% of all of his medical bills until he reaches that out-of-pocket max of $7,000. At $7,000, his health insurance will cover the rest. Mr. Mouse will not have to spend another penny on any medical bills once he reaches that out-of-pocket max. So the best way to budget for a given year with your health insurance is to go backwards. So if you have an out-of-pocket max that is different than your deductible, I want you to start there. Mr. Mouse's out-of-pocket max is $7,000, and so what he wants to consider is that he may end up spending $7,000 in a given year for his deductible. If he has a family, it could be almost double that. So when we see a real life example of this, let's say that Mr. Mouse gets hit by a car, poor guy, ends up going to the hospital. Hospital charges a $20,000 to take care of him. Mr. Mouse is responsible for 20% of that bill according to his plan, but 20% ends up being $4,000, which is way higher than his deductible. And so Mr. Mouse only pays up to his deductible, $700. What a lot of people don't understand is that the doctors at the hospital are contractors, so they have their own separate bill. So the hospital as a facility will send you a bill, and the ER doctor will send you a separate bill. And so that 20% insurance applies to this second bill of $2,000 that the doctor sends. Mr. Mouse ends up being $400 that he ends up paying. Which is lower than his $700, but that's 20% of the bill. Again, for his ambulance was $1,500. Mr. Mouse has a 20% coinsurance for ambulance rides. He ends up paying $300 for the total bill under his deductible. So in total, Mr. Mouse ends up spending $1,400 on that total hospital bill for one hospital visit, which is double his $700 deductible. And then what he also has to consider are future x-rays, future physical therapy, medication, etc., etc. Those are all their own separate bills where the deductible will be applied again and again. Again, this is different for some people. Some people only have to hit their deductible once and they're covered for the rest of the year. But for a lot of people, your deductible is split up by how many different types of places you go and doctors you see. And so in a given year, you could reach that out-of-pocket max for Mr. Mouse of $7,000 if you have a major event. I hope that helped clarifies with some very specific examples about why 6 different insurance terms can make things quite complicated. For those of you who are interested in learning how to negotiate your medical bills, I do have a class. It's at smart-patients.teachable.com. that you can take on figuring out how to negotiate your medical bills if after whether you have insurance or not, you end up with a very high bill that you cannot afford. Thank you for your time, you guys.